Okay, so I'm Ben Brumfield,
I'm Sarah Brumfield.
and we are obviously a husband and wife digitization shop. We are a couple of software engineers who do work mainly in the digital humanities, and that's led us into IIIF and other bits of library technology. The main thing that we do is run a crowdsourcing platform called FromThePage. So FromThePage is a open source tool that was first debuted at the very first DAT camp. So it's got deep roots in the digital humanities. So back in 2008 was the first time this was kind of shown, and was released open source shortly afterwards. It's been installed at the University of Texas Libraries, University of Leiden, University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Fordham University, New York Botanical Gardens, and we also host projects on our cloud service FromThePage.com. And that's for a subscription fee. That's also what we'll be using today because it's the easiest way to get up and running. So we're not gonna take you through installing on any servers or anything like that. We're gonna focus on the transcription platform and on the way that it brings IIIF images and metadata in, and then the ways that it exposes transcripts on the way out, also using IIIF.
So we've been involved with IIIF since 2015. This is actually a very recent screenshot of two different medieval witnesses to a medieval manuscript that were recently transcribed and pulled into Mirador 3 using our IIIF manifest, but the Mirador 3 application. And I am just kind of blown away by how pretty it all looks. You have a pretty manuscript, you have a pretty piece of software, you've got great transcriptions. But that's sort of an example of one of the many ways that we kind of interact with and touch IIIF. We've had IIIF funding to build out functionality, and FromThePage, we've taught, if you were here in the beginning, we were kind of chatting about different things. We've taught IIIF workshops for a number of universities and organizations. A couple of years ago, we co-wrote the implementation guide for IIIF. So we have been very involved in IIIF for quite a long time.
And we are fans, we're practically evangelists for IIIF because IIIF makes our lives easier. We run a transcription platform, and we want to spend our time helping people transcribe documents. We want to spend our time helping scholars edit texts. We really want to focus on ways, our goal is to have conversations with librarians and archivists and other scholars around their texts, around getting people to work on their texts, around finding volunteers, around textual encoding. But what we found from around 2010 until we discovered IIIF was that the majority of our conversations were about image uploads. Can we deal with zip files? What about PNGs? What about TIFFs? What about PDFs? And this was this huge hurdle for us. It was this enormous pain of getting images from library sites onto the transcription platform. And IIIF came along and was a dream come true. It really solved all this for us. And since then, since the coronavirus and the lockdown started 3 months ago, we've seen projects get started in 48 hours because of IIIF, right? It's just been so nice to be able to integrate with the rest of the world using these APIs.
Right. So let's get started. We promised a hands-on workshop, so we're going to do that. So we have a lot of slides, but we might kind of switch back and forth between that and a live web browser. But the first thing we're going to have you do is go to FromThePage.com, and please do that now.
And we're going to have you create an account that allows you to ingest material from IIIF manifests. So this is not an end user account. This is going to be what we call a project owner account. We have a way to do that automatically if you click this Start Free Trial button. You're not agreeing to anything with our commercial service or anything like that. We're just trying to get you up and running quickly. So if I go to my dashboard, I can click Start a Project and then import a IIIF manifest or collection.
And then
I just
paste
that
the
in.
manifest in. So this is a version 2 manifest, IIIF version 2. We don't support version 3 yet.
So at this point, I'm going to say that I want to, I just have a chance to review a little bit of this manifest to see, what the metadata says. And I'm going to create a new collection. I'm going to call it DHSI 2020 Ben Brumfield, and create that collection. That's like my own little project. And then once I've done that, I'll select that collection and import the manifest into the collection. And that's going to churn for a while because the software has to read the manifest and then create parallel objects internally for its own bookkeeping for each one of the pages, or each one of the pages of a letter, or pages of the diary in this case. Perhaps I should have chosen a letter.
Letters go faster than
Yes,
diaries.
that's right.
So we don't pull in the images, obviously, because you've learned how the IIIF image API works. But we do pull in all of the structure about the document.
We can see that my diary has finally finished importing, and I have a list of all of the pages along with a thumbnail. And the great thing about IIIF is that those thumbnails are fetched directly from the Portal to Texas History and their image servers. The same thing is true of all the pages.
Let's go ahead and click through one of the pages and show off everyone's favorite deep zoom in IIIF.
So this is OpenSeaDragon. And, the thing that we love about OpenSeaDragon and about IIIF is that we can go really, really deep. We can see for difficult letters or things we're having trouble reading, Cis-Dasher, for example, we can just dive in there and get really high resolution of what has been uploaded.
Yeah, and from the page you can upload actual images. We'll take TIFFs and things, but we convert them to access copies that are not nearly this.
And while we do serve the
high
images
risk
that are uploaded to us out via IIIF, we still have down converted them first. So if you have images on a IIIF image server, things are much better. Everyone's much happier if we can serve them directly this way.
Next thing we wanted to do is kind of show what our transcription screen looks like. So because FromThePage is a crowdsourcing platform, we put a lot of work into making our user interface simple and hopefully obvious to the volunteers and
other scholars, other collaborators, staff members, students.
but people who are going to be doing the transcription. So you have the image on the left, you can move it around, it can be on the right or on the top or on the bottom.
And switch to full screen. So this, on the top is nice for getting a good
all the way across.
And we're going to go ahead and transcribe just a couple of lines from the first entry.
I would add April 25th.
You would add April 25th.
Oh. To admit, we did not pick a very good diary because it looks like
it looks like an address list.
Yes.
That's right. Okay, so we're just going to save that. I think I want to pull myself out of full screen as well. Okay, so as we transcribed, this gives us something that we can see as a transcription. And, if we go back up to the full diary and look at the page that had image 30 in it, which I think was around the 6th page, you can see that we see our Mrs. J.W. Bradley. We can add to that. Things are not necessarily done quickly. We might want to revise as we go. We might want to review what we're doing. And what we try to do in that case is record everything that people are doing. So I'm going to add just one line. As we do that, one of the side effects of adding things is that we have stored a new version of each page. So we can see here the line that I just added in this version. If I go back a version, I can see that in my previous version, the previous time I saved, we only had one line. One of the things that you'll notice as you're transcribing is that we're transcribing an entire page at a time. This is a little bit different from the kinds of annotations you probably saw earlier in the day, which typically are on regions of images. It's possible to have a web annotation or an open annotation that targets an entire canvas, which is what we're doing in this case, or even several canvases. You know, the act of importing, the act of bringing things in and starting the project, that's really something the project owner does. But the act of transcribing can be done by almost anyone, by whoever the project owner allows this to be done by.
So usually what we talk about next is transcription convention. So if you scroll to the bottom of even this page, you'll see that every page when you're on the transcription screen has these transcription conventions in them. These are our defaults. They're not the best defaults. They were for like the very first project.
Very appropriate for our first project.
Yes. But if we go to one of the project that we own, that works. Or
oh, the fact that we can change them?
Yes, the fact that we can change them, the settings.
Yeah, so I can change, you know, let me go back to the one that we were in. Sorry, that's Glenn's. Right. Okay, so I can go up to this project that only has this one work that we brought in, and I can go to settings, and this is where I have control over all kinds of things, but one of the most important things that I have control over is the transcription conventions. And those transcription conventions are displayed at the bottom of the screen, right where a user may need them. This is the kind of activity, developing transcription conventions is an art in itself, and there's plenty of documentary editors and people in other forms of textual scholarship that have very strong opinions about this. But really the thing that we encourage people to do is to get one or more people together working on transcribing some of the material in your projects, and think about the questions that you ask yourself as you are transcribing things. You know, and even something as simple as this diary that we ran into here, you know, has lots of questions associated with it. You know, how should you mark up January 15th as a header? How should you mark up some
X's?
of these, right, some of these other things here, like an X, right? Or she means something by that, I'm not sure what, right?
So you can do a lot with these transcription conventions, and we have an example. So this is
a project at University College Dublin. This is a project John Howard ran that is transcribing a lot of material that's written in Irish Gaelic. And in addition to being in a language that's not English, or that a lot of modern people are unfamiliar with, is that Gaelic has its own script that is very unusual for a lot of speakers of modern Irish and modern English. So in addition to the transcription conventions that you've seen before, John Howard, the person running this project, has added all sorts of things about editorial comments, but also helpers on transcribing Gaelic script that include deep linked images that pull in examples of what this might be as it's transcribed. Nice little helpers on the alphabet and how to transliterate these letters that have dots over them into modern Roman script with PHs and SHs and THs and these things. So there's guidelines for essentially paleography and orthography all together that he's put with this particular project.
You can do a lot. A lot of people also, if you're working with characters that are not standard to your transcriber's keyboards, you can put example characters in these, and then they can copy and paste them into your transcription. There's lots of different things you can do here.
Take a look. So there's a question, how do you replicate the spelling in the transcript?
No, the spacing.
Spacing in the transcript. So there is a, so it looks like as we're transcribing, it looks like we are transcribing plain text. In fact, what we are writing is wiki text. We're using a markup language that is very similar to either Markdown or to the MediaWiki markup and has elements brought from either of those. So the spaces, the carriage returns at the end of the line indicate a line break, and those will be word wrapped in cases where we might want to see the document all together. So here we have those word wrapped because they're part of the same stanza, but you know, not because the ends of the lines are not meaningful outside of the context of the page. When we jump back into the page, we can see having new lines indicates paragraph breaks. We have a much longer section of markup of things that we handle. But generally speaking, we try to get end users to just handle the spacing like they'd like, as they see, as if they were doing a typewritten document. We do not handle all indentation. We don't handle all white spaces. In particular, we don't really handle horizontal white space that might indicate an indentation at the beginning of a paragraph, for example.
So we have a lot of different ways to restrict or make private your projects. So these are actually 3 different screenshots from different layers of that. So an individual work, so what you imported when you imported that individual IIIF manifest is what we think of as a work, and then a group of works or one work can be part of a collection. So you can restrict an individual work so that it is visible to anyone, but can only be transcribed or edited by collaborators that you add. So that's kind of what we see on the left side. When you pop up to the collection level, then we give you a number of other controls. You can make your entire collection private. In fact, we'd like to ask you to do that now so you don't get random drive-by transcribers coming in to work on your import, the thing that you did just for this class. When you make your collection private, as you see on the far right side, you have the ability to add collection collaborators. So those collaborators can then see your collection and work on your collection as if it was public, but no one else can. It doesn't show up on our list of projects. It's not crawlable by web crawlers. It's as if it doesn't exist. When you have a public or a private project, you can add what we think of as secondary collection owners. So that's useful if you have, other staff members, or perhaps you're a librarian who's setting up a project for a class, but the professor who's teaching the class would like to get, the overnight emails that say, here's what happened on your collection last night or over the last day. Or maybe someone else would be adding material to this collection. Or someone else is developing your transcription conventions and they need access to those settings. So that's where you can kind of add a collection owner. So we do have API access, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. If your collection is public, then our IIIF API will publish it. It'll be available to anyone, right? If your collection is private, then we shut that off, and you have to come click this Open API if you want to be able to.
If you want programmatic access to a private collection, which some projects do.
Right. We'll see if there's any questions about that, and then we're going to talk about research.
Are there questions on? Okay. More questions. Can you differentiate textual blocks or columns? So for textual blocks, most people differentiate that just by vertical white space and leaving empty spaces. For columns, and this shows up in a lot of the projects that are dealing with 2-column medieval manuscripts, it also shows up for more modern material in which images, like the diary we were just looking at, have been digitized with an entire opening. So there's really 2 pages that are being transcribed into 1 page. Most of the projects that we've worked with just have people transcribe those in reading order, leaving white space, blank lines between one column or another column. Some of them use editorial notes with single square braces to say left column, right column, or left page, right page as they go.
Is there any way to handle abbreviations and or mark expanded abbreviations?
I
can think of 2 different ways to do it off the top of my head.
Go for it. Yes.
So, part of this is your transcription conventions. You could choose to say, when you transcribe an abbreviation, you can follow it with a parenthesis that says expanded abbreviation and the expansion. Whatever you would choose to do that's along those lines. The other thing is, and we're not going into this today, but we're happy to go into it after this workshop or separately. We have a style of what we call subject linking, where you can apply wiki style links around certain words. And you can reference that verbatim text to a emergent vocabulary word that you have created that may be exactly that text or maybe a canonical version of that text.
Like a formal subject heading. One thing that I would encourage you to think of if you're running a project on any transcription platform is to be very careful about how you ask users to encode text in light of the purpose that you're going to put that text to. So if you are going to pull out the material via IIIF and put it someplace in a library system for full text search, if that library system can't handle XML markup or HTML markup or things like that, then it doesn't make sense to ask end users to do that. And this is true for things like special symbols. We ran into a case earlier this week of a library that was encoding old chemical texts. And people who are using that material nowadays are looking for modern chemical symbols, like Bi for bismuth. This was using the old alchemical symbols. And while there are Unicode versions of alchemy symbols, they're not what a modern researcher is looking for. So it makes sense to ask the transcribers to modernize the old alchemy symbols to modern chemical symbols like you might find on a periodical table. Okay, so in addition to public-facing crowdsourcing projects, it's also possible to use many of these crowdsourcing platforms, including FromThePage, for smaller projects. Fundamentally, crowdsourcing is about collaboration, but it's not the only kind of collaboration. So there are a number of projects that have been running that we've seen that use the platform for doing a research project. So you have a distributed group of scholarly editors, for example, who are editing a text in Old French. And here's an example. This top one is a set of legal codes from the Assizes of Jerusalem. So you have this Crusader era legal text. And there are a group of people, the French of Outremer, the French legal text working group at Fordham University, who transcribed these documents after importing them in IIIF, and then translated them. And they translated them as they were transcribing them. They'd go through a transcription as a pass of a page, and then they'd translate it as a page. And they would do it synchronously. They would do this using Google Hangouts at the time. You could use a Zoom meeting. And it was fascinating. We sat on a few of those sessions. It was fascinating to see them work. One person would type, the others would read and discuss, and usually one person was deputized to look up the Old French in a dictionary. Then they'd kind of all sign off, but many of them would keep working, and you could see that they would leave notes saying, oh, we have trouble with this phrase, what's going on? And then somebody else says, oh, well, we're going to keep this in the Old French rather than modernizing it. So it is possible to do these kinds of projects on a very, very large scale with thousands of contributors, or on a very small scale with only a classroom or perhaps only 3 or 4 scholars. In addition to transcription, we also support translation. This is developed by our friends at Fordham. Here's an example of a letter that has been transcribed. This is a letter from a French naval commander to George Washington during the American Revolution. After it's been transcribed, we can translate the letter from the source language into a target language. In this case, I'm translating it into English.
And you can swap back and forth between the transcription on the left, and there's that show image button that will take you back to the original image.
Right, and each of those will be exposed as separate IIIF annotations for that image, one for the translation and one for the transcription. Let me check to see if there have been any more questions. Can we index with a, oh wait, sorry, let me start at the top. So as well as free text, is there a way of marking up or labeling areas to be transcribed if you have forms or reports that are always structured the same way? Yes, there is. There's a totally separate part of FromThePage that is field-based transcription designed specifically for these kinds of forms and index cards.
Those projects.
Sure, let's let me go get out of the presentation, and if I just take a look at the activity stream, those are very popular, and so we can see Here's an example from the Maryland State Archives of a project. And you can see that this is a very different kind of user interface. They have defined the specific fields that they want to collect, and they're asking volunteers to pull them in. And they've also added a controlled vocabulary for certain fields, like the month of the marriage, a year, or a county, which has to be a county in Maryland. So can we index with a controlled vocabulary? So in addition to this kind of drop-down controlled vocabulary, as Sarah mentioned, subject indexing within a text. And the answer to that is yes, you can define a set of subject headings, and then as people encounter them,
Look at
we can pull
NVCs.
them in. Okay, yeah. Do
We
have
have
one
plenty of
those up?
time, so.
Oh, we do? Okay.
Yes, so it is
good.
fine. We don't have MVC
All right,
yet.
so
but,
let's pull up vertebrate zoology.
So we work with a kind of an emergent vocabulary. So as you tag things using the wiki tagging, then it becomes part of the subjects that we support and keep track of. We actually are building out for a documentary editing project the ability to pull in a names list, which is not exactly the same as like referencing the Library of Congress subject headings or anything, but it gives you a starting place. We don't know how it's going to end up working out for crowdsourcing projects, but for documentary editing and kind of research-based projects, it makes sense.
So here's an example of a ornithology notebook that has been transcribed by the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology at UC Berkeley. And they care a lot about the species that are mentioned within these documents, not just the birds, but also the vegetation, the trees and the other kinds of things that indicate the habitat that the birds are seen in. So if I see digger pine has been marked up, and it's been indexed, and we can read the 2 pages that mention a digger pine because they've been indexed. How that's done is done within the text using wiki links. So I can look here and see that digger pine has been surrounded with 2 square braces, which say this is a term to be indexed. Those can vary based on the text itself. So Grinnell, for example, is what we see in the text. Joseph Grinnell is the subject heading that it's to be indexed to. So let's see about other questions. Okay.
One of the cool things about this type of vocabulary where we keep track of the verbatim text and the canonical text is that in other pages that haven't had these subjects linked, you can actually go through and see that auto link button. We'll find one that we're more comfortable doing.
Yeah, so one of our own projects. So if we jump into a set of agricultural diaries and go into one of these books. So here's, this project has had some indexing done. And if I go to transcribe this document, you can see that a volunteer has done a great job transcribing it, but has not indexed. And if I auto link, that is going to look at all the markup that has previously been applied to this project and suggest new markup. So it suggested that I link plowing to the subject term plowing. It suggests that I link Jordan to Jordan, Meadsville to Meadsville, Virginia, Jerry, who is the diarist's son, to Jeremiah Hunt Graves. It's not perfect. Humans have to review it. There are cases in which definitely this gets some things wrong and I have to unlink things. But we do have the ability to kind of mine that to be able to use it for editorial consistency and a little bit of labor saving. Okay, other questions? Now, okay, let's get back into the discussion of getting data out, right? So IIIF is all about data interchange. It's all about pulling material in, pulling material out, being able to reuse digitized artifacts and scholarly contributions and annotations on those. So for our world, transcriptions and translations are annotations that have been created on top of these images. So how do we get them out? If I go and take a look at the document that I imported, which is
There.
we go. Yes, right here. Okay, so if I go take a look where I was, the Blanche Perry Painting Diary, and I go up to the very top, I see my project configuration. There is a tab that says Export. And the export screen lists all the works in this project. There's only one. And I have the ability to pull the whole thing out as HTML or plain text or TEI. But the most interesting for our purposes in our class is the IIIF. And this is a IIIF manifest that is created based on the originating manifest of the Portal of Texas History.
Make that a little bit bigger.
Yes, let's definitely make this larger. But it is something that is ready for us to import, right? So we can come down and we can see, well, this is—
You're going to hate
yes,
having
yes,
to remember what you transcribed.
No, I don't remember what page I transcribed, unfortunately. But we can take this manifest and import it into Mirador or the Universal Viewer or any other system. And we'd recommend Mirador because that does display annotations. And then we should be able to see the image served from the original Portal of Texas History.
So if you go back to like the third slide of our presentation.
And we can see that next to a transcript that's served out by FromThePage. So these examples are great examples of Mirador displaying images that are pulled in. This image is pulled in from Yale and being served to the user from Yale. This image is pulled in from the Bibliothèque Nationale de France and pulled in from there. So we're serving things from images from Connecticut and from Paris. And those are being served right next to transcripts that are pulled in from our crowdsourcing engine. We could then do on-screen annotations in Mirador and have those annotations stored in yet a third place, but presented next to the annotations that are pulled from FromThePage, for example. I mean, IIIF is so powerful. I just rave about it too much, I'm sorry.